when I first got into real estate and people, I was learning and, older people were telling me, it's going to crash, it's going to crash. I know it's going to crash. And just like it never crashes, right? I was just thinking about, do you know your lifetime sales?
I'm gonna say it's probably over 40 billion. I would say.
How much? How does the next generation or even these immigrants get into the housing market?
Can't honestly tell you. There's an answer for that that really makes sense.
How much money do you need to make in order to qualify for that house currently?
Right.
And I remember thinking, I'm like, two doctors, two salaries, have money, and can't afford the average house in Vancouver. I mean, that's a travesty, right? Is real estate the best investment, hands down? Hey, Charles, welcome to the podcast. Really nice to see you again, man.
Good morning, Mario. It's been a real pleasure. Thanks for having me on your podcast.
Absolutely. So, yeah, we like to have really successful people on, and you're one of those guys that I've known for over 20 years. And, your field of expertise is the real estate market, and it's also in probably the top five real estate markets in the world, Vancouver, Canada. So, I want to have a chat with you about, not only what's happening now in real estate, but also, your experience and some of your marketing tactics and whatnot. But even going back further when you were a rookie, some of those stories are pretty funny and pretty good, and I want to chat to you about those if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of nice going down memory lane and relive all these things. It's not often you get to chat about all this stuff.
Totally, yeah. So yeah, let's dive into how did you start in real estate? Was that something that you always wanted to do, or did you just like have a friend or something? Like, take us back. I don't even know how many years. 20 years, 23. I don't know how many.
Well, I was licensed in '96, so I would have been taking my courses and stuff like that in about '95. I would have thought at that time.
Wow.
I've been in sales pretty well out of high school, pretty well all my life, mostly in various types of sales, men's retail sales, and all types of things. And I started off in Calgary, Alberta at that time
Okay.
there. And then I moved to Vancouver. Things had brought me over to this big city. I always loved it as a kid. I loved the big city, and so I gravitated out this way. And I still I worked in retail sales for a while in the mall, and kind of learned the land, of sales and the environment I was in, basically, and just the whole city was growing at that time. And I got tired of retail sales, and my skill set was really I enjoyed being with people. I love the whole idea of being with people, and real estate was something that got thrown around. I'm not too sure where it got thrown around, but it did, and it really excited me because somebody said it's like the skill set for real estate really was the same. It's a people business. The only thing that changes it was the product, right? Instead of selling a
Sure.
shirt, selling real estate, but the working with people was the same. So I got my license, and that's when I started out for real estate in Vancouver. I got my license in '96, and at that time, the city hadn't really developed that much. It wasn't. It was a big city, but Vancouver was not known for condos and towers and stuff like that. It was still a very it was still a very office oriented type of buildings in the city. But there was a
Right.
section of the town, the West End, Old Town, and that's kind of where people had lived. And most of the demographic of people who lived in the city lived in the West End. And my career kind of started off from there, I would say.
Right. And so I was just thinking about, do you know your lifetime sales by chance?
It's a very good question. I was thinking about it, and there was not too long ago that I had posted that on. I believe it was a bio or something like that, probably 5 6 years ago. But I'm going to say it's probably. I'm gonna say it's probably over 40 billion. I would say.
How much?
Yeah, I would say it's close to 40 billion in sales.
40 billion in sales. I love it. That's crazy. I was going to guess like maybe a billion, I'm like 40 billion. That's amazing. That's crazy. So we got lots to talk about. That's like some crazy number. So what was your first sale? Do you still remember that?
I do. My very first sale was a guy that to this day, he is one of my best clients to this day, and we'll touch base back on that because I think Mario, you were my second client,
I think so. I think so.
but I still remember the gentleman. I remember the sale vividly. It was in a brand new building in Cole Harbor in downtown Vancouver, and at that time we were contemplating a sale. I remember, and it was a struggle if he could afford the $125,000 price tag or not.
uh,
So yeah, it was. I always remember that particular sale. It was very unique, and I had to really hustle along to make that transaction happen for my client at that time. And I remember there were some special deals that the seller was willing to make for the sale to basically happen, and for me to really come up with these unique, creative ways to present it to the client.
right.
For him to say, this is a good deal. I'm going to buy it. And he wasn't sure about it because nobody was
Sure.
buying $20,000 condos in the city.
Sure. So it's still super interesting when you talk price points, right? So like late '90s, early 2000s, you could still pick up a condo in Vancouver under 200 grand, and that same condo now is well over a mil. And I remember when I first got into real estate, and people, I was learning, and older people were telling me, God only makes so much land. You should always buy a house, don't buy a condo, kind of deal, right?
Yeah,
And I always, and over the last, I don't know how many years, I'm like, it's gonna crash, it's gonna crash. I know it's gonna crash, and just like it never crashes, right?
it
So
never crashes.
it's bizarre, right? So I mean, it does have little ups and downs, whatever, but it never actually has crashed. Even 2008, during the great recession in the U.S., it only came down maybe 20% or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And so I guess the question is real estate the best investment, hands down?
I would say hands down, it's just because I've been in it for so long, such a long period of time, over 26 years, and a lot of those clients that I've seen that I've invested back then, I've seen that net worth and I've seen that portfolio grow, and I know where I sold that real estate parcel at that time, and where they are today, and and some of my clients have held on to that real estate, and so when you look at mortgages here, for example, to put it into perspective, you take out a mortgage and the terms of these mortgage rates are usually 25 years, right? And when you're taking it out and you think to yourself, wow, 25 years, that's such a long time away.
Right.
Nobody thinks that 25
Of
years, but
course.
some people have held on for 25 years, and these homes they're paid off now, and they're sitting as solid asset portfolios for them. So the rental revenue income is 100% income for the ones that are retiring now, on top of whatever they're receiving as a pension fund or whatever. These income also adds to it on top of the fact of the asset value itself. So yeah, I'm going to say absolutely it's one of the best investments somebody can make out there. I mean, there's other investments probably has some higher risks attached to it, but is this a really nice steady piece of thing to own? Absolutely it is. Yes.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I mean, I kick myself for selling any of the real estate I've had, and I was always of the opinion that I can make the money work faster than 7%, which is the average over whatever 50, 60 years. Although it hasn't been 7%, it's
Hmm.
definitely been heck of a lot more than that. So, tell me a little bit about what's happening in Vancouver. I mean, it is probably the top three most expensive cities, not only to live in but also in terms of real estate. So, what's happening? What has happened over the last 2 3 years? I know mortgage rates have gone up as well, but what's the state of the real estate economy in Vancouver, Canada?
Well, currently, the way it is as is right now, I think the market has taken a bit of a pause, a bit of a back seat to it, moving as fast and as forward as it has been over the last number of years. And I think COVID kind of exponentially, nobody knew how it was going to react. Actually, we all thought we were going to be out of a job for a while, but it skyrocketed even more. Now, geographically, the city is a small space. We're surrounded by mountains on one side, we have the ocean on the other side, and then you just keep going out to the valley, which is kind of more or less the farming areas and the communities, which you're restricted from building housing there. But the livability of the city is something that it's growing every year, and I think with the internet and how people are able to work remotely, and I'm not talking during the COVID years. I'm talking from way back in the early, I'm gonna say 20s, late 90s, when people discovered that a lot of self-made types of individuals can work out of the city. It's got a great international airport that you can fly anywhere around the world within 10 hours, I would say, unless you're going further,
Yep.
in some of the places. So it makes it a great place to work out of. There's a lot of immigration that happened in this city over the course of the last 20 years. There's a lot of people who have brought their families here to for their kids to go to school, to live in. It's a very safe kind of an environment. At the same time, it's truly a four season type of an environment. In the wintertime, it's got great weather. You have the rain, you have the snow, you can go golfing and skiing on the same day.
Right.
You can't do that anywhere around the world. And so because of all these factors, it's become a very attractive city for a lot of people. And but we have a housing problem today, as most places do around the world. I think with our policies in place, the housing had taken off, and there was a trend where real estate became almost like a novelty thing to do in the city. And there were such large pieces of investment that it was like buying gum at the candy store, I guess you could say, right? Everybody
Right.
wanted a piece of it. But all of that supply and stuff has really like dried itself up, and the struggle we have now is finding enough developers to build enough products and enough homes out there for everybody, for all the types of people that are in the city. And as a result of it, we've been in a steady pace of supply and demand ever since, I'm going to say, for the last 15, maybe 20 years. And it's only gotten worse every year as more people enter the home ownership market and more people coming in from abroad to, for the livability of the city. So that formula has been changing, and there hasn't been enough investments in other parts of housing where it also does create problems for unaffordability, I would say. So there's like a melting pot of all types of things happening in the city. The price is pretty expensive here. Yes, it's been it's just been really, really the demand has really driven itself up on its own. I mean, during the COVID year, it was a classic example. There was a lot of speculation that it was a foreign buyer's market, but when they came in with all these policies, it never proved to be the case. It was
Right.
just the market continued going up, and this was strictly driven by the local economy and the local marketplace.
Right.
So we haven't opened up the doors again yet, but when we do, we see that the higher price tag of the homes will also have that effect once again.
What
So
is
it's
the
it's
sorry
been
to
a
interrupt. What
sorry.
is the this is this I'm gonna forget if I don't ask you. What is the average home price in Vancouver now? It's November 2023.
Well, there's if you look at the city, I'll separate between condos and a
Sure.
house basically, and the various areas. But if you're looking to buy a one bedroom condo in the city of Vancouver or in the surrounding immediate areas, I think the median price for a one bedroom would be about 620 to $650,000. I would say is your average.
Sure.
If you're looking to buy a house in Vancouver proper, I would say if it's just an average house, I think the median price on that is probably sitting around the 1.4, 1.5 kind of range, I would say.
Okay.
If you go in the outskirts and you go further outside of the city of Vancouver, I think that house average median price drops down to probably about a million two, million three. Not a lot. One bedroom averages seems to be holding fairly steady as you go outside the city, right? It still seems
Hmm.
to be it'll either be between 620, 630 to 600,000. It's not a huge variance. Again, it, that problem of supply and demand seems to be affecting the entire greater Vancouver
Sure.
regional district, right?
And this $1.5 million house, we're talking about a very, very old kind
It's
of,
a, it's a
you know,
very old house. You have a nice piece of lot. The home probably is a 45-year plus type of home, and it probably needs a lot of improvements.
right. So
Yeah.
if you want to get into something decent, like Kitsilano or anything on the in the west side, you're talking two, three, four.
Yeah,
million?
a nicer home, a nicer home. I guess what people envision to be a nicer home. I would easily say in Vancouver, you should expect to spend, $2 to $2.5 million
Right.
for
Okay.
sure, and that's a
Great.
nicer family home. I'm not talking
Sure.
about a luxury home, just a nice, good family home, kids,
Sure.
schools, things like that.
Absolutely. And so now the next question is, how does the next generation or even these immigrants get into the housing market?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Mario. It's I think it's a question that almost every major city around the world is tackling. Is how do we do that with such a shortage of housing? And I can't honestly tell you there's an answer for that that really makes sense outside of the obvious, which is build more houses, but that has its challenges, right? You have municipalities, you have existing zoning policies to overcome, and you got local governments and things like that. So it's a challenge. It's a big problem. It's a big challenge, and we're not too sure what the real solution to that really is. I definitely think that the city needs to itself invest. The province needs to get involved in developing more like programs for housing that's not. I'm not going to say social housing. I'm going to say more like government funded housing for the average Canadians. Everybody making in between 80 and $120,000. These guys are the people that work in the city. They support the police department, the fire department, the ambulance departments, the school boards, and various infrastructures that support the city. They all sit in that income structure there, but there's not enough housing for them. So if we don't supply enough proper housing for that sector, the city is going to find itself dying, I guess
Right.
you could say, right?
So what is the so like you take an average house, 1.5, 1.6 million, 1.7 average that needs renos. What how much money do you need to make in order to qualify for that house currently?
Well, and here's another problem, I guess you would say, is if you were to buy a house today, Mario, you said, Charles, I want to buy a house in Vancouver. I have 25. I have 25% down, or let's say you want to buy a home for $1 million. You have $250,000 for a down payment. That means you need about a $750,000 mortgage. First thing is, we're not qualifying. If you go to the bank at that time, you used to be able to qualify at 2.5, 3%, maybe 3.5%, and you can get that mortgage no problem. But today, you have to go to the bank, and even the 5-year rates are sitting posted at about 7%. I believe it is 6, seven
Wow.
percent.
Wow.
But they have a pressure cooker test, so in case things get worse, that you're able to afford it. So they tack on an extra 2%. So you have to qualify, Mario, now at about 9.5%. Imagine
Wow.
that. So that severely handicaps the buying power as to what you can really afford. Because if you're in the city, if you're making $100,000 in the city or anywhere, if your income is $100,000, you technically qualify for about a $500,000 mortgage. That's, if we cut to the chase, that's about what you qualify for. So can you buy the $1 million home, making $100,000 with $250,000? Probably not, unless the home has a mortgage helper or something like that to add additional income, or if you had a partner who's also working contributing to the home. It requires a lot. So you can imagine that disconnect and how people are getting into the market. Either you've made lots of money from a previous real estate
That's right.
transaction,
Yep.
right? But it definitely is not like that people are making a lot more money in the city. It's just that a lot of people have come to the city, and over the course of years have made all of their wealth from buying and selling real estate. So
Right.
that's more or less how it's working. But what
Right.
that does, to your question, Mario, makes it very tough for new people to enter the marketplace.
Yeah, it's it's pretty concerning that, I mean, I remember there was a vet, and it was him and his wife, so there were two vets, and I believe they were making something about close to 300,000 a year,
Hmm.
and they could not afford a nicer home in Vancouver. They had to move to the island. This was maybe 4 years ago. I'm not going to talk about
Right,
it now.
right.
And I remember thinking, I'm like, two doctors, two salaries, have money, and can't afford the average house in Vancouver. I mean, that's a travesty, right? And I think that yeah, if you've been in the market for 20 years and you've held on and maybe have a couple extra rentals, sure, you're
Yeah,
wealthy.
yeah.
But the not even we're not talking about the average person. We're talking about two doctors. So I
Mhm.
think that's super concerning. I think that's something that the like you said, a disconnect of the system is really unfortunate. I suppose but it is what it is. I don't know what the solutions are. Inflation is going through the roof, so things are only going to get more expensive. So I don't know what the right thing to do is. But having these conversations is pretty important, I think, because then you can kind of like you know see if there is any solutions to that. So I don't know if you have any thoughts about that.
Well, I think the city has a long-term wise. Vancouver has a huge opportunity still that exists and lies. I mean, there's a lot of the disconnect, and I think you'll find a lot of people who come to Vancouver really appreciate that you live near the city, but there's a lot of houses that's really near the city. You don't really see that in a lot of major cities around the world globally, right?
Right.
There's a lot of apartments, a lot of buildings, a lot of family, multi-family types of things like that, and that is where they have to transform the city, and that's where the opportunity lies to rezone some of these neighborhoods. We're no longer a city of where um, it's feasible to own just a piece of property. That piece of property is worth multiple homes. So it's on track, and it's finding its struggles and its feet to help transform all those homes into a multiple family. And that's really the solution. The ideology of owning land in a piece of house in a major global city around the world, it's not realistic anymore. The city grew on, it grew for the reason that it's grown, and then now it needs to accommodate the people who want to live here. And the way to do that is to transform the ideology and the thought process that we all need to own a piece of land.
Sure.
But we don't need to own a piece of land, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So what percentage of your sales would you say are repeat customers?
Oh, today my business mostly is repeat clientele, which is I'm gonna say it's a good um, about 80% of my business every year is repeat clientele.
Amazing. Yeah. So
Yeah.
the next question is, now that you have acquired this goodwill, so to speak, with all your clients and everything like that, what was it like when you first started? How did you acquire these clients? Like, what type of marketing were you doing, and what was that like?
Well, back then, I don't know if you ever watched the movie Glenn Gary, Glenn Ross, but
Sure, a classic.
some people don't understand that, but it's a classic movie. And we well, that's kind of how you and I met. It was a lot of hard work, Mario. It was a lot of hard work. You kind of dedicated your life was work, and work was life. Basically, you eat and you breathe and you just live the business all day. You were constantly thinking about it. We did not have the internet in those days. We had an old DOS computer system. Had to dial up and wait for the phone tone to get onto the phone to see a few dots
Sure.
percolate on the screen there, right?
Yep.
But it was a lot of hard work. I mean, when I say hard work, I mean like we did a lot of open houses. There was a lot of like honing in our skills with a lot of people who came to open house who couldn't really afford them, but it really gave me a chance to talk to people,
Sure.
learn about them, discover ways of selling a property to them from my sales background. Anyways, there was a lot of newspaper advertising, sending mails and flyers, and talking to people everywhere. Pretty well anything and everything was the motto, and it lasted for a while till people recognized that, I saw you last week, I saw you doing this, I saw you doing that, and it wasn't because I did a good job. It was more or less because I was constantly there all the time, and I think they recognized that guy's a hard worker.
Sure.
I'm going to give him a shot.
Yeah.
And so it was years of that, really.
That's right.
No magic to it.
That's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty crazy. I mean, I can't imagine getting into the market now, and yeah, there's a lot of social media. There's a lot of things. I mean, you can add value these days, I suppose, if you're really not. I remember, I don't even know, 15 years ago, maybe 10, there was a guy that basically drove around Vancouver with a camera, and he basically just described all the different areas, and he was going through the pricing. And I thought it was amazing. It was like the beginning of social media, right? I don't
Right.
remember the guy's name. I don't know, maybe you know him, but it was really cool. He was giving a lot of stats on the area as he was driving down the street. I thought it was amazing. You know, that was like super interesting. So, what's the most expensive house you ever sold?
There was a parcel of land up in British properties, I believe, which was about a $17 million property. That was a number of years ago.
Right.
That probably would have been my most expensive piece of real estate, and that was a while ago. I mean, some of the big sales today are hitting $50 million. They're rare, but there are some big price tags, and so it's goes to show you that the type of real estate we hold on to down here.
Yeah, it's spectacular, isn't it? So I know that you're expanding into Costa Rica. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, Costa Rica is a really, really interesting marketplace. And as you know, we have some mutual friends that live down in Costa Rica, and some extended friends that have moved all down there. And I was down there probably a couple of years ago for one of my good friends' weddings, and his wife ended up being a realtor. She was in the finance industry before. And in talking to my friends there, Costa Rica is one of the safest democratic places in Latin America. There's a lot of business that goes in there, in and out of there. Basically, they have some great taxation system for corporations and companies. A lot of U.S. companies are down there, and the world is starting to discover Costa Rica, and it's got a huge industry of health and wellness down there. Of well-being, the term "pura vida," which is very, it just means living well, right?
Hmm.
And so, with a lot of expats, Canadians and U.S. and other, Europeans that are down there, and I think they really enjoy that really relaxed environment and lifestyle. Now, it's still an emerging country in terms of its real estate, its technologies, its infrastructures, its shopping and stuff like that. So the opportunities in Costa Rica is actually quite huge. It's a great place to go and discover what you want to do because what I'm discovering is that they really are craving the things that we're so used to, here in Canada, for example, or in parts of Europe where they've got great, you know, um, progress with technologies and innovations and things like that, and they crave it down there now. And so they're always you got all of these expats that are down there bringing some of these. They're not new innovations. They've already been tried and true in other places, but they
Sure.
want them down there.
Yep.
So it's almost a huge opportunity if you're looking to leave where where people reside now, looking for other places to make income and establish businesses. And at the same time, it's just the whole lifestyle of Costa Rica being a relaxed. It's an alternative to Mexico. Used to be a big hotspot, but I think
That's
people
right.
are looking beyond that now, and Costa Rica seems to be the one. So there's a lot of vested international people buying real estate down there, and you can own real estate outright on title. It's not on leased land or anything like that.
Hmm.
So it's starting, and they've only recently opened up the banking systems a bit more now, where you're able to obtain mortgages,
Oh
where
wow.
it was not like that uh, for I'm going to say up until the last year. So
Okay.
it's going to open up even more doors and more opportunities and more developments down there as a result of that now.
Right. And what is I mean, I'm familiar with some of the Latin American countries where, you have to put 50% down or even more. What are these terms? And can a foreigner qualify for a mortgage down there? How does it work?
Yeah, I'm discovering a little bit more about that as we go along. Mario, we have our business partners down there as well under our brand at BNC Real Estate Group there, and I do plan to make a business trip down there not too long from here, and gonna sit down with some of the bankers that are involved with these things. I'd like to know for myself, but from my understanding, I believe it's qualifying like you would qualify anywhere else. I think it's a minimum 25 to 35% down,
Okay.
and I think there's a credit check in terms of where you come from or all that type of stuff. But I don't think it's in a very invasive process. I would say
Sure.
it's a lot easier. I think,
Hmm.
and I just think that the banks are realizing the opportunities in the lending world of mortgages now as
Right.
it's starting to become more and more popular. So that to me means again opportunity. It's
Sure.
growing opportunity, right?
And obviously the price points are way lower, right?
You can buy a fantastic piece of property in Costa Rica for probably, I'm going to say $300,000 US, $200,000 to $300,000 US. You can buy a nice two-bedroom home. If you have a bigger budget from maybe 500,000 or six $700,000, you can find like homes that are like 1,500 square feet,
Sure,
uh, two three bedrooms, view, ocean, beaches, things like that, gated
sure.
communities. So it offers a
Amazing.
lot. Yeah,
Amazing.
yeah,
Yeah, it's interesting to see some of the up and coming countries, and I spend most of my time between Europe and Asia, and man, I see some wicked. They're not even deals. They're just regular priced homes, and you look at it and you go, "Oh my God!" I mean, back in the U.S. or Canada, you are hard pressed to get a studio for the
yeah.
price of what appears to be a mansion. Like it's just
I,
craziness, right? So the again, it's going back to the disconnect. So it's really disconnecting, and that's why you see a lot of people retiring in these new areas, like
sure.
Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, obviously, always been like that. And, and Eastern Europe, same thing, although prices now have increased significantly and all that. So, yeah, that's really interesting. So yeah, Costa Rica is great. I've been there many many times. It's a very peaceful country. They don't even have a military. They only have police. So it's
That's right. That's right.
yeah, yeah. The ticos are pretty fun, and they love to party and have a good time. And it's so different from the Western culture, right? I mean, it's great. I really love it.
Yeah, and I think the Eagles are really embracing influence coming from outside to help them just elevate their level of moving forward in the world like everybody else is, right? But I don't think they will. They're at the same time they want to preserve what it is
Sure.
all about to go to Costa Rica,
So take out your
right?
little crystal ball, which I
Sure.
always every time we have a drink, I always ask you the same question. So what are your predictions for 2024, 2025 for the real estate market in Canada?
I think the Canadian real estate market is probably going to still see a bit of a pause in 2024. I think it needs to, as things stabilize in terms of rates, when affordability, the affordability is going to happen when the mortgage rates and the banking rates start dropping, so people can afford more. Things can happen a bit more. It's cheaper for a developer to build a development, and when supply increases, I mean everything was going well until when inflation hit, and money became really expensive to borrow. When money becomes very expensive to borrow, it slows down the entire process.
Sure,
So, is that going to get any cheaper in 2024? I don't think so. I think our year gonna is gonna our opportunities are gonna lie in 2025 onwards, if you ask me. But I definitely think if you're a buyer, 2024 coming up is a great time to purchase things that are gonna be on the market for sure, because it's just I think 2024 and 25 is a transition year, for things to the dust to settle a lot more, and for the market to find its footing and its land on a solid space to work from again, and that's where I think where we're going to be.
right. Yeah, I probably agree with you. Cool. Well, last question for you. This is the
Sure.
question I ask every one of my guests, and that is, if you were in my shoes and you would ask yourself a question that I didn't ask, what would that be?
If I was in your shoes and I would ask myself a question,
That I didn't ask.
um, let's see. I would say, um, I would say how I would say Charles or Mario. After 26 years, are you still enjoying doing what you're doing, and how has it incorporated into your life today?
Okay, cool. And what's the answer?
I would say, yeah. I don't think I can get this not selling real estate out of my system. Um, Almost everywhere I go and everybody I talk to, it's great that way because I have some really, really in depth, interesting. It's a common conversation at almost every kind of table you sit at
Sure.
is the market and real estate. And so having that experience and background to talk about it with everything that I know makes it a really pleasant conversation. It makes it engaging. Has it, and personally, my personal life is my friends are all surrounded in some way, shape, or form that has to do with the industry. So, I don't work as hard as I used to a number of years ago. As you know, Mario, fortunately now I'm trying to take more time to smell the flowers to balance my life out 24/7, I guess you could say. And
Yep.